What's going on, everybody? Gem Mint here, back with another recent reads. As promised, we have the Absolute Swamp Thing by Alan Moore, Volume 3, completing a true masterpiece of a run. This was the first experience, my first experience reading this in this format too. Kind of kicking myself for selling volumes 1 and 2. I'll probably sell this on Whatnot and just hope that they make an omnibus with the original coloring. But today, we're going to go through a thorough deep dive review of the final chapter of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. One of my favorite superhero comics of all time, if not the number one. It's hard to say. Before I do that, I mentioned Whatnot. This will probably be for sale this Wednesday. I'm going live at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern to kick off Whatnot Wednesday, which is me and my crew. We do 8 hours of auctions with Comic Tom, Nerdy Girl Comics, and so on. I'm going to be bringing some good stuff, man. I also got Injustice Issue 1, First Spider-Man 2099. We got The Dark Knight Returns, Batman 1. We have First Omega Red, and then I have Spawn Issues 1, 3, 2, 9. So come through to Whatnot. If you haven't downloaded the app, the link's in the description. You'll get a $10 credit that you can use towards your first purchase no matter where you spend it, and it'll kick back a referral here this way as well. With that being said, let's jump into the overhead shots and then come back for my final thoughts. Beautiful artwork on the front of the hardcover slipcase, as you would expect here. Here we have the spine. I love the neon green against the murky dark green of the swamp. Beautiful artwork on the back. It's a $100 book. And of course we have the actual hardcover with that felt-like material. Amazing. Probably my favorite Absolute to date. It used to be Preacher, followed by Sandman. I think this is the best, the most well-constructed Absolute. Takes the number one spot, followed by Preacher, then Sandman. Alright, so let's open up. We have a beautiful cover page, followed by another. We have the credits here on the creative team. You have the issues here, so collecting Swamp Thing issues 51 through 64, excuse me. Plus DC Comics presents 85. It ends with a Superman tie-in. It starts here, recapping the end of the last arc, where we left off at the end of the last Absolute edition. Swamp Thing making a journey back to Earth, back to Abigail. He's with Deadman. Deadman acts very much like the comic relief, which I'm glad wasn't a major part of this book, to be honest. But right away in the beginning, traverse through the green to travel to Abby, who's been under scrutiny back on Earth for being involved with the Swamp Thing. She's being tried almost as if she did something perverse because he's not human. So we'll touch on that a little bit. That leads into the first arc after we leave this conversation with Constantine, who was a big part of the first 2 Absolute editions. Abby tries to skip town, goes to Gotham City, ends up getting roped up with some ladies of the night. That's how she gets arrested. That's how she gets in this whole heap of trouble as Swamp Thing returns. Again, look at him growing from this seed to this sentient beast. We got Bullock from Gotham City, so I really like how Alan Moore ties this into the Batman lore, to the DC continuity here. Swamp Thing, once he finds out that Abigail's been arrested and is being held captive, he loses it. He gets pissed, and he, kind of like the Flash, uses this power to zoom through the green, leaving this trail of vegetation in his wake as he's on his way to free his love. Now, she's held up in Gotham City, so what Swamp Thing ends up doing, and we get little cameos here, Two-Face, the Joker, he ends up turning Gotham City into a swamp. This overhead shot reminded me of like the CW Flash and how he's kind of zooming through the city. Gets handed this rose, and he grows from the rose, because at this point he could just materialize from any vegetation. So this first reunion, it's the first of 2 big reunions that we'll see in this book. Yeah, so he could just, boom, transport himself anywhere. Here we have Gotham City and how it's overrun by the vegetation, who is being overlooked by Batman. So that was so cool. Love to see them tie in Batman to some of these issues. The cover for the next issue is amazing as Swamp Thing, continues his attack on Gotham. Batman answers the call. We got Gordon and Bullock here. And what's interesting about transforming Gotham into a swamp and having people trip out on his sweet potatoes, is that some people they really embrace it and they really thrive and they go naked and they just live in the wilderness within the city, which actually spawns this environmentalist group who will befriend Abby later on in this book. So then we get an epic battle, Batman and Swamp Thing, and it feels like BVS. It feels cinematic. There's little words. Batman's got his gadgets. Swamp Thing's got tricks up his sleeve. Swamp Thing's able to materialize and become big like the Marshmallow State Puff Man or whatever. Beautiful artwork here, and showing how some people are looking at Swamp Thing as more of a savior and less than somebody who's attacking, less than an enemy. And then Batman starts to question his motives as well, as he's now taken his final form as this huge tree monster. When Batman figures out they have Abigail holed up in jail for that reason, he kind of says, well, what if Superman? What if Lois Lane is married to Superman and he's not human? What constitutes human? You know, and that's the logic that kind of got her off the hook and got Swamp Thing to back off. But as they reunite, somebody has Swamp Thing in the scopes. It was Lex Luthor, as we saw earlier, and he gets hit to where it separates him from the green. They hit him with the napalm, separating Swamp Thing from the green, essentially in everyone else's eyes, just killed. As Batman looks on, we deal with the death of Swamp Thing for the next few issues. So we get a lot of mourning from Abigail. Very sad, very dramatic. The artwork has great storytelling aspects. Batman feels terrible, like it's his fault because of his involvement. Chester is, trying to tell her about the environmentalist group and to hang out with them as she's mourning. That's when Abigail befriends this woman who is a victim of domestic abuse. She's being controlled, manipulated, or whatever by this guy who essentially has her brainwashed, almost like a child. So Abigail takes her in, and that's kind of like her pet project, as she saves her and hopes for the return of Swamp Thing, although she still thinks that he's dead at this time. As you can see, the next cover, still mourning. Love the artwork here, just like those long panels, this storytelling, zooming in and zooming out, overlooking this statue of Swamp Thing that was erected in Gotham, kind of as tribute since they left on good terms and he was assassinated. She still tries to visit him in the swamps, but he has like empty husks and things laying around. So she starts having flashbacks and things of that nature. Again, the issue ending, zooming out like how it started, zooming out to where Swamp Thing was transported because he didn't die. He was separated from the green. His consciousness went to the next habitable planet with life form, which is the blue planet. So now we get probably, my favorite issue. One of my favorite issues out of this Absolute Edition, the all blue issue, as he's now basically merged with this blue sentient vegetation here. He can create husks of himself, and he can split his consciousness into two and play chess with himself and create Abigail and have relations with her and build a little city, kind of like Dr. Manhattan does on Mars, right? And it's blue too. How fitting. Maybe this was the inspiration. But he decides that that's no life to live, and he's living this big delusion, and he starts going crazy, and he's able to transport his consciousness willingly to the next habitable planet, which takes him to this red planet, which is a nice Adam Strange tie-in. He's on the planet of Ron, and that's a cool little tie-in. Now we went from Batman in Gotham City to Adam Strange over on Ron, and in the midst of a Thanagarian invasion that Ron is kind of unaware of. Great issue. And, reading Tom King's recent run, I can see where the inspiration came from. Adam Strange is very much infatuated with Alana, and he just thinks about her and pines over her the whole time, even when he's fighting. So that whole kind of lovesick thing that Tom King does with other characters, it makes sense why he did it with Adam Strange after reading this issue. So this was just a cool issue. Like most absolutes, this does come with a ribbon, so unfortunately you don't need your GemMint bookmark to read this book. But I did like the Adam Strange tie-in. I believe it was just these two issues or maybe a third. Yeah, because then after this we jump into this Abigail arc with her father. Now, she has some bad luck, and she's gone through some trauma. It starts off with her childhood and her father reading her this story of Frankenstein. He ends up becoming the Patchwork Man and a literal Frankenstein in this, and I'm trying to recall that happening in the last volumes, but I can't. And then this whole nursing home thing with this orderly who was killing inmates or patients or whatever you want to call them. So very DC Vertigo-ish, just kind of a little story arc tying it into her father, which does end up looping back at the end of this arc, which was kind of nice, but very dramatic, very theatrical, the rain, the emotion, and then going into this abstract format. It even says on the cover that it's a brand new format, special price, and this tells this abstract story, I think, of Swamp Thing's consciousness, thinking it's bonding with a planet in like the essence of it, like the green or the blue, but it's really this kind of like organic life form that's kind of like a satellite, kind of like a ship, semi-organic, and it fights Swamp Thing's influence, and it's told as a novel with like this abstract art. I mean, I tried to keep up with it. I think I kind of kept up with it. You know, it was one of those kind of weird Alan Moore things, man. Trippy as hell. It was fun, though. I mean, unique. Then we get into another planet. So his consciousness escapes the defeat of trying to bond with that essence. And he goes to this planet with these floral people. But the problem is, when he bonds with the essence, he kind of becomes this monster made up of all of those sentient life forms, those beings. And it becomes a bad thing where, like, as he's walking, he's crushing the people that are making up the bottom of the feet. So it's this Green Lantern story with the Green Lantern of that sector, Medfill. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Who has to basically go, fight with Swamp Thing to not bond. And obviously, Swamp Thing wasn't doing it maliciously. He didn't know. And moving forward, so essentially this book is very much the death of Swamp Thing and him traversing his journey back from the cosmos to return to Earth. This story involves Metron and the Mobius chair crashing, and Swamp Thing being trapped within a mother box and becoming free, causing the Mobius chair to crash. Swamp Thing becomes the Mobius chair, and they traverse to Apocalypse. They think they go to the source, beyond the source wall, but it ends up being an Aleph, whatever that is. And what Alan Moore is showing us here is showing Metron and Swamp Thing every event from every moment in time since the beginning of time at once, which drives Swamp Thing insane. So crazy. Got a cool little interaction with Darkseid, and this moment here is reflecting all of Swamp Thing's like core memories, like his life flashing before his eyes at once. So Darkseid and Metron get an idea of what Swamp Thing's all about, and it's cool how he gets something out of this interaction that he thinks will help him with the anti-life equation, which is his whole thing. All right, so anyway, now we have the return of Swamp Thing. He's got his kind of whole core essence. He's able to beam back to Earth here. Now, trying to remember as he comes back, I think he starts taking his revenge out on people that were doing Abigail wrong and keeping her imprisoned and things of that nature. So he was doing some pretty dirty stuff, man. Killing people with all types of vegetation, whether they're getting them lost in their own maze in their backyard, or turning into the lettuce out of their sandwich and coming out of their mouths and making them a living tree. So his return to Earth was pretty scary. I mean, he killed a bunch of people. I think law enforcement people. But he erupts and finally returns. Abigail had faith the whole time. Chester was holding her down. And then issue 64, which is really the last issue here, is just kind of more recapping what their relationship was like, with his return, like what they do now. This is kind of what we got in the previous volumes of them hanging out in the swamp. He just takes down a gator just to flex. He builds a house. He figures, why, would I make you go back to the city? Well, I guess they make love first and trip out on those sweet potatoes. And look at the art here. Look how you have Swamp Thing on the ground, the water under him with his body, representing his human body. The turtles. Swamp Thing is everything. He's the green. This is telling the planet before life forms, to water-based life, to land-crawling animals, to dinosaurs. And that's when he decides to build the house. that they describe as very beautiful from the inside. The outside is kind of unassuming. They say goodbye to their friends who continue the environmental work, and it's just a beautiful ending of the return of Swamp Thing. Abigail has gone through a hell of an ordeal in her life. She deserves the happiness. And then we end it with this DC Comics Presents 85, a Superman story that has to do with Superman being poisoned by this meteor that had what later becomes known as vegetation from Krypton that infects him and was known to infect animals on Krypton. Once you're infected, there's nothing you could do about it. It starts dwindling his powers down little by little, and eventually he knows he's going to die, so he just goes to travel somewhere. Swamp Thing runs into him. He's able to bond with the essence of that vegetation, know what it takes to defeat it, and essentially give Superman what he needs to save himself. He essentially saves Superman, so just showing how strong he is. And that's another thing that makes this run so great, is that Alan Moore gave us the origin, a new origin for Swamp Thing, gave him this elemental status, and became like almost godlike, became like a deity. This is not from the Swamp Thing movie. This was a sculpt that they used for artistic references on here. You have some interviews and scripts as bonus material in the back here, which is always cool to dive into the mind of the creative team. We also have some sketches and inks for some of these pages. Some great ones like this Dark Side page that we saw earlier. Wow, man, what a run. What a ride. I would love to reread this. I really would love to experience it with the original coloring. I'm thinking of picking up that original box set. I think it contained regular size hardcovers, or it might even be trade paperbacks. I would love to read it all the way through. However, and one of the reasons why I sold the first 2 volumes is I have such a backlog of stuff that it's so rare for me to reread something. So there's something I haven't read that I would rather jump into first. So with that being said, going to sell this on Whatnot this Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, with a slew of other collected editions. I have some other omnibus and those single issues that I showed you guys earlier. Amazing run. I would recommend it to anybody, but give me your thoughts on Alan Moore's Swamp Thing in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and stay minty fresh. Peace.